All right, welcome everyone. We're going to give others just one more moment to join before we get started. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started so that we can make the best use of our time. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar that's going to be a bit of a program overview and an FAQ for the NSLI-Y, Flex Abroad, and Yes Abroad programs. My name is Libby Enninga. I am a program officer with the NSLI-Y program. And today I am joined by my program manager, Emily Matz-Henry, who will be answering your questions using the chat function if you have any questions, as well as the Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad team, who I will let introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sky Henry, and I'm the Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad program manager. I work at American Councils, and I've worked on Yes Abroad since 2012, and I've been the program manager since 2015. And I also started, along with my colleagues, Flex Abroad a few years ago. Nice to meet you.
And hi, everyone. My name is Emily Shartner. I also work on the Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad team. I'm going on 2 years now on this team, and I look forward to answering any of your guys' questions.
Okay, so the way this will work is that Sky and I are going to do a little overview and answer some of the frequently asked questions that we receive. But you are more than welcome to also enter your own questions using the chat feature. We ask that that's how all questions are sent to us. We are not going to be permitting people to use microphones to ask questions verbally. And you may want to give a bit of time before you start asking questions because it's likely that Sky and I will answer your questions throughout this presentation. This presentation is also being recorded and it will be uploaded onto all of our respective YouTube channels after we finish. Okay, Emily, could you go to the next slide for me, please? Wonderful. So a bit of an overview of how today's going to work is we are going to do an overview of each of the programs individually. As I mentioned, Sky and I are going to discuss some of the frequently asked questions we get through this program, discuss the important deadlines since we do have an application that is open, and then the rest of the time will be open for you all to ask any questions that you may have. Sky and I will answer some verbally, and then both Emily's will also be in the chat answering questions there as well. So if Sky or I don't shout out your question, make sure that you're checking the chat. Anything to add, Sky? All right, next slide.
Wait, just that. Sorry. I'm always finding ways. Okay, so I'm always finding ways to set realistic expectations for you guys, parents and applicants alike, because I and the NSLI team manage all of the participants and the parents once the participants come on program. And over the past 10 years have definitely seen a lot of trends in how applicants and parents engage with the program and program staff. And what I've seen essentially post-program is that people struggle to find the information that we present and then see, is my question answered, or is my question that I'm asking, has it already been presented in a certain way? People are very quick to say oh, can you just tell me exactly where it is? Can you just answer my question? So I do want to say, we made this webinar because these are the questions we get the most frequently. So almost certainly the questions that you have are going to be presented in here, whether they're titled with the exact way you would title them. It's our intent to answer as much about this process and the program as we can based on our 10 years of managing it. So definitely please hold your questions unless there's something exceptionally specific to what we are saying. If that's the case, our staff, our colleagues will shoot us the question and I'll try to add it. but the most efficient way to get through this is for us to kind of talk about it and then do the questions at the end. So just reiterating what Libby said, but adding the why behind it because it makes all the difference. And that's our general expectation for anyone who's participating in these programs as well. Thanks. Sorry.
Not a problem. All right, bit of an overview. Emily, if you can hit what is citizen diplomacy? So I think Sky is going to take this question talking about what is citizen diplomacy and how it relates to our programs.
Yeah, citizen diplomacy is simple and complex. It is simply the idea that average citizens, just like you, just like me, not people with diplomatic passports, can, by learning about one another's cultures, language, backgrounds, meeting one another, playing soccer with one another, that we can create world peace. Like, not to sound too lofty or cheesy, but it's the idea that average citizens meeting one another, creating long-lasting ties, creating bonds, speaking each other's language, eating each other's food, can gain understanding, empathy, and build these relationships so that in time, when you understand, when you hear about a country, you don't think, oh, this other place I've never heard of. You think, my friend. And it's incredibly powerful. And citizen diplomacy is responsible for some of the best relationships that our country has, and that's why the U.S. Department of State invests in it. The purpose of these programs is to create, for us, the State Department wants us to create relationships with people all around the world to bring about world peace to the best of our ability.
Great, thank you, Sky. All right, so we are going to be discussing NSLI-Y, Yes Abroad, and Flex Abroad in more detail later on, but I'm happy to just comment on NSLI-Y now. NSLI-Y is the National Security Language Initiative for Youth. We offer programs for high school students to study critical languages abroad for summer or academic year, as well as virtually. And we'll get more into the program itself later on. And then I'll let Sky answer for Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad.
Yeah, Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad are citizen diplomacy cultural exchange programs. They're culturally immersive, which means you're not with other Americans, you're with the people of the country, generally speaking, although we have some small cohorts. 10-month overseas, going to local high schools, living with a host family, and yeah, 10 months, no summer programs.
Perfect. Next bullet point, please. All right, why study abroad in high school? So we believe there are numerous reasons why studying abroad in high school is a really beneficial experience. Starting, these programs are a really unique educational opportunity at a very formative time in your life. We believe cross-cultural youth exchange is powerful as it promotes future leadership for you all. High school students can become immersed in their host community, they connect with their local peers abroad, and they promote citizen diplomacy as a team, as Sky just described. Our alumni for all of these programs report that participation in these programs has created a lifetime of interest in cross-cultural learning and has helped all of them refine their academic and career goals. And while it's not one of our main goals with any of these programs, our participants also report that they gain really important life skills through participating in these programs. Skills like problem solving, collaboration with others, and open communication, as well as cross-cultural communication.
Can I just also add to that? I'm sitting here looking at post-program surveys and updating questions for post-program surveys in the future. And all the questions we ask in this and alumni surveys are, was this program beneficial to you in your professional skills and your personal skills? And we get this question a lot. I think we'll probably maybe talk about this a little bit later. We got a lot of questions last year from 15-year-olds about what's better for their career, Flex Abroad or Yes Abroad or NSLI-Y. And that's a very complex answer, but the short version is they're all good. They're immeasurably good because they do provide you with a really I can't think of the right word. I'm sorry. A really like immersive set of skills for you to use in your future career.
All right, and then Sky, I think you're also going to go over what the scholarships
You got it.
cover.
Scholarship covers airfare, tuition in any educational environment. So for NSLI-Y, this would be like the program of learning the language. And if you're enrolled in part at a local institution, it would be part of that. For Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad, it'd be school tuition. It covers medical benefits, secondary medical benefits. It covers orientations. It covers your room and board, most likely, which will be in a host family. In some cases for NSLI-Y, it might be in a dormitory specifically set up by the program and like a host family on the weekend, and it would cover meals and also covers a stipend, a monthly stipend.
All right, next slide, please, Emily. Great. So we are now going to get a bit more into what is NSLI-Y. Thank you, Emily. So as I mentioned earlier, NSLI-Y is the National Security Language Initiative for Youth. We provide merit-based scholarships to U.S. high school students who are interested in studying a critical language. These students are able to participate in a summer academic year program overseas in a location where one of our 7 languages is spoken, as well as a virtual program for beginners, which is known as Virtual NSLI-Y. But for today, we're mostly going to focus on the overseas programs for summer and academic year. So presently, NSLI-Y offers 7 languages. Those languages are Arabic, Mandarin Chinese, Indonesian, Korean, Persian in the Tajiki dialect, Russian, and Turkish. And our participants are going to receive intensive language instruction while they're abroad. As Sky mentioned, they majority live with a host family for some or all of, or excuse me, for part or all of their program. And they're going to also participate in a variety of cultural activities. So we get a lot of questions about what a typical day is going to look like on program. This is going to look like intensive language study, but you are going to have this instruction coupled with different cultural activities that help you better understand your program location. Next slide. Thank you.
Great. All right, Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad. So these are reciprocal exchanges of the Flex and Yes programs. Some of you may have had Flex and Yes exchange students at your school. These programs were started, well, the Flex program was started 30 years ago. It was started at the end of the Cold War as the Soviet Union dissolved to engage young people from this part of the world, from countries with whom the United States wanted to foster better relationships with the citizens of these countries, foster better relationships with them. So for 30 years, approximately 700 to 900 students from Flex countries. So this started as countries from the former Soviet Union, but it has been expanded to include a number of other Eastern Bloc countries and now even countries like Mongolia, Greece, to come to the United States. They live with American host families. They go to American high schools. They learn all about America. And more realistic picture of America, because almost all of these participants believe they're quite familiar with America based on what they see on TV. But when they come here, they learn more about what America is really like, both good and maybe not as good as what they thought America was like based on what they saw on television or in the movies. So Flex is incredibly successful. There's tens of thousands of alumni all around the world, members of parliament, ambassadors, but also people running corporations, nonprofits, and being members of their society. One of the things they do while they're here is learn all about civil society and volunteerism, and we stay engaged with them as alumni. In their home countries. After September 11th, 2001, the State Department said they needed to do something just like Flex, but with countries with significant Muslim populations. So 20 years ago, the State Department started the YES program to engage young people from countries with significant Muslim populations. We've also brought in approximately 600 to 900 young students from all around the world. They don't need to be Muslim. Many of them are from countries where the majority religion is something else, like Orthodox Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism. However, the idea is that you're bringing participants from these countries to the United States to learn about these same ideas, right? What America is really like, to develop relationships with Americans, for Americans to learn about them. My family has hosted before. It was amazing. We learned a lot about where our host student was from and stay in touch with them. And so 2009, the State Department said that they wanted to start sending Americans back to these countries. Flex currently has, I think, 26 countries we bring students from. And yes, I think currently has around 36. And we started sending Americans back to a handful of them. The program has kind of widened over the year. We've sent more and more students there. Currently, I think we have 11 host countries in all regions that YES comes from. Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, North Africa, Southeast Europe, India, and Southeast Asia. And for Flex, we send back to 4 of the 26 countries: Poland, Romania, Kazakhstan, and Georgia. So like we said, it's a 10-month program. American high school kids go back and have the exact same experience. They live with host families. They learn all about the countries on Flex and YES, and they build relationships with people in those countries.
All right, now we are going to get to the frequently asked questions that Sky mentioned we're receiving a lot. And the first question is, who takes care of me when I'm overseas? Sky, do you want to take that one?
Sure, but I think I'm definitely answering the next one as well. So I wasn't sure if this one was yours too, or if well, I guess these are both, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for Flex, definitely who takes Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, who takes care of you, it's twofold. The person or the party primarily responsible for the logistics of your day-to-day life is your local coordinator. So in all of our host countries, the program has permanent offices that kind of monitor the students. We don't monitor students day to day, but you do have an office that's permanently responsible for you. On Flex Abroad and for 1/3 of the Yes Abroad countries, it's American Councils. We have offices in 8 of these countries. And for Yes Abroad, there are 2 other organizations that we've worked with for a really long time that also have offices in these countries, and they work on the Yes Inbound program as well. So each student is assigned a local coordinator, and a local coordinator, or a liaison in some of the countries they're called, is responsible for checking in with you on a minimum monthly basis. But I have yet to meet any student who only sees a person that they who's like responsible for them monthly. They're always available to answer questions, help you if you have a problem, give you feedback if you're having some sort of kind of cross-cultural challenge. And then you have your host family, who is primarily responsible for your day-to-day needs, making sure you've eaten, which they do in spades, making sure you get up and go to school. If you are having a hard day, they're there to give you a hug. It's your job to make sure that you integrate yourself into their host family, so that you don't just show up and have like a replacement real mom and dad who just have like the faces and speak the language of your host country. You really have to build this relationship, but when you do, it pays itself back tenfold, and you have a new family there. And like I said, you also have offices and local coordinators in your countries in case you need to go to the doctor, because sometimes that happens, right? And then we have our offices in the US, either Washington, D.C. for 2 of these Yes Abroad organizations, and in New York City for one of the other ones. And they are working with those offices overseas, and they will keep parents updated.
NSLI-Y is very similar to the organization that Sky just described. So NSLI-Y also has local coordinators or resident directors in all of our host locations. This is someone who speaks both English and the host location language fluently. And just as Sky explained, they're there to assist you with anything that you need. If you're sick, if you're having some sort of issue with your host family that you need assistance sort of resolving, anything like that. Another sort of notable difference is that while The Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad cohorts are either very small or students are sort of on their own. NSLI-Y is going to be an experience where you are in a cohort of typically around 20 to 25 students, American students, that you will travel abroad with, and these will be the students that you are studying the language with. So you are going to have a bit of a community for you there amongst your other participants in your cohort. Additionally, NSLI-Y also has host families, and the experience is very similar to what Sky just described. And as well as how I just described, NSLI-Y, the administration is housed by American Councils for International Education. And then we work with a number of implementing organizations that actually work with you all to go abroad with the academic programming as well as scheduling all of your travel. So you also may be coming to DC for your pre-departure orientation, but it's also possible that you could be in New York or Seattle even. And what is it like to live in a host family? I believe Sky will be answering this question.
Sure. It's something we talk about a lot. We spend a lot of our time, helping prepare participants for what it's like to, as I like to often say, pick yourselves up out of the comfortable environment that potentially you're living in now, or at least familiar, and moved across the world to a place where we talk about written versus unwritten rules a lot, right? So like where you kind of already understand all of the unwritten rules of living in a family in your own house, you're moving to a place where you don't understand the cultural unwritten rules and you're still learning many of the written rules. So in one word, it's really complex and it's also really hard. I think sometimes participants hear from alumni, oh, it's like having another mom and another dad. I was just reading the post-program surveys for Flex Abroad this past year, and under proudest achievement, a student said his proudest achievement was when his host mom said he was their fourth son, which he worked really hard to develop an intense, wonderful bond with that host family. But I think sometimes people show up and they kind of expect to just have that, but it's not like that, right? Suddenly you don't control the time of day that you're eating, the type of food that you're eating, the amount that you want to eat. I mean, ultimately you get to determine how much food you eat, but you're always going to have a host mom who's saying, do you want more? Please take more. Please take more. Because as we say in a lot of the countries that American Councils implements in, a mom shows her love through serving food and making food, and a kid shows their love through eating the food. So this can be really different if you are in America and you maybe lead a busy life and your parents are leading busy lives and you're all sort of like taking care of yourself after school. Maybe somebody has to come home and then turn around and go back to band practice or volleyball practice or something like this. So suddenly the kind of the time of day and the culture around food is really different. Who has like access to your bedroom, right? I think in America, a lot of times American teens think this is kind of my space. Like if the door's closed, it means I want privacy and it's my space and I can kind of keep it how I want. And maybe parents are kind of like, okay, it's their space. They're going to have to. No, in a host family overseas, that is their house. You are keeping it immaculately. And they're going to come in and get the laundry out of the closet. And they expect to see the laundry in the laundry basket and not on the floor. And so these can be the things that trip people up. However, again, we spend a lot of time preparing people to go into this precise environment. You go in with an open mind, you go in with an open heart, you go in with a lot of questions and the ability to reflect and adapt. You can really develop an amazing relationship with people and learn about your host country and about what makes the culture, what are the values underlying the culture, how do people express things, and learn a lot about yourself by living in a family instead of living in a hotel or something like this, right? This is like an integral part of the design of the program. So in short, it can be really hard, but it can also be really rewarding. And there aren't exchange programs that aren't hard, right? All of this is hard. And what makes it really hard is ultimately what makes it really rewarding and really beneficial in a way that no one else who hasn't gone on an exchange program or who hasn't kind of done Peace Corps or something similar can experience. And that's why participation on these programs and being an alumni of these programs is so valuable to you in the long run, because it pushes you in ways that nothing else does.
Yeah, NSLI-Y would agree with everything Sky just shared. So next FAQ we have, how long are the programs? So all three programs, Flex Abroad, Yes Abroad, and NSLI-Y offer academic year programs. These are 10-month long programs. One difference with NSLI-Y is that we also have a summer option. These programs last 6 to 7 weeks. They typically begin end of June, early July, and students return early to mid-August. It's important to note that Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad do not have summer options. So if you're interested in those programs, they are going to be 10-month long programs. And then next question, can I get academic credit for participating in these programs? Sky, what's the answer?
Yeah, it depends entirely on your American school. So I'm trying to think real fast. For 3 of the 4 Flex Abroad countries, you go to school in the local language or a combination of local language and English. In one of the countries, if you're a gap year participant, so if you've already graduated from high school, we try and send you to a school where they speak the local language. And if you haven't, we send you to a school that's in English. For Yes Abroad, I would say at least 2/3 of the countries are either in English or in a language you already speak, which we'll get to in a minute about language prerequisites. So participants almost always are able to walk away with some sort of transcript-like piece of paper, whether it's a transcript that says ABC for an AP class in English, or it's you participated in this class for this many hours and took tests and took quizzes, whether or not the Ministry of Education in that country will let them give you something like that. So this is all to say what you can walk away with kind of varies, but if your school is kind of willing to be flexible, maybe they'd give you credit for like all the classes that you took that were in English, right? That the school can say, yeah, they took this class in English. And or if your language is very good, if you're in French, or maybe you already spoke Russian a little bit and your Russian gets really good while you're there, you can say you can participate in the class as well. Most people can walk away with something like that. But again, this matters completely on your American school. The program, neither Flex Abroad nor Yes Abroad can agree, like, or guarantee that you should be in 11th grade or 12th grade in America, but we put you in that exact grade overseas. That doesn't work like that. We don't get to wave a magic wand and like kind of recreate America with a different scenery. It is truly like we're working in partnership with the ministries of education all around the world. And so it's what they're able to do. So some of our countries also have age and grade limitations as to who we can even send to those countries. So in short, now is the time to start talking to your American high school about studying abroad. Manifest it. I would like to study abroad. Here's what I'm doing. What do you think? The more you have these conversations now, the more people kind of get in their brain about how they can be flexible. In fact, the very first answer you might hear from your American school is, sorry, we can't do that. Oh, I don't know how that's going to work. Way better to have that conversation now. And then over the course of the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, they come back to you, they ask questions, you're able to share more information, and everyone's sort of like cooked that idea in their head. So start now. And in short, this completely depends on your American school.
Yeah, for NSLI-Y, it's a bit different. So while with Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, students are attending a local school, with NSLI-Y, the focus of your studies is going to be language focused. So our students, even on the academic year program, are not going to be going to school studying science, mathematics, history, as you would at your local school in the United States. The focus is going to be on language programming. Some students who already do have advanced knowledge in the language may have those opportunities, but that's entirely dependent. And we do tell students that they should not plan on taking sort of their standard high school courses while participating in NSLI-Y. So both the academic year program and the summer program are administered under that standard, that students are focusing on language learning rather than the more standard exchange experience that you're getting with Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad. What our students will do is at the end of their program, they are going to take an assessment that is called the oral proficiency interview. This is a very well-known language assessment that helps us understand what language level you're at after participating in that program. And all of our participants will receive an official certificate that notifies them what their OPI rating was. A lot of students are able to then take this certificate back to their high school, or maybe once they've moved on to university, and get credit for the language based off of what language level they're at. But just as Sky mentioned, this is going to be entirely dependent on your school. And we would also encourage you that if you're intending on applying to our academic year program, that you begin a dialogue with your school administration now as well, that you explain to them what you would be doing and understand any sort of credits, any sort of tasks you need to complete before and or after participating in the program. All right, can I pick which country I live in? So Sky, I'll let you go ahead and answer this for Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad.
Sure. So as I mentioned, each country has age and grade requirements that we need to work within. This has to do with the schools we've found overseas and their kind of suitability for the program. So, for example, we're not going to just send everyone to like quote unquote the best high school in town because none of those kids is going to have time to be your friend. They're going to be studying nonstop. So we want to make sure that we find schools where you are welcomed and treated as a member of the community and embraced, and people are interested in the fact that you're there. So that's, we want, and they also are like somewhere under an hour away from your host family, preferably 30 to 45 minutes, kind of max, from your host family by public transportation, which almost all of you will be taking. And so yeah, we want to make sure that, we're picking schools that meet all these criteria. And sometimes they say, sorry, we can only take 10th and 11th graders, or sorry, we can only take 11th and 12th graders. So that's one limitation. However, on your application, you'll see that we do ask for your preference as to why you want to live there. And so, or what countries you want to live in. And then we give you an opportunity to kind of say why. We absolutely look at this in the final selection and then placement meeting. So we want to make sure that we see who's eligible for what, and then we think, where does this person want to go? And then the next question is, do we think that person, based on what we know from their interview and their application, would be a good fit there? And there's a lot of things that make a good fit. In my experience, I've never in more than 10 years seen someone's reasoning about why they want to go to a certain place be well, I've seen why someone says they can't go to a certain place. That I've seen a few of those that seem like a good reason from our perspective. I've never seen someone say, I really only want to go to this country because, and that be something that's real. Because in reality, life in these countries is really different. We also know what our offices are like in those countries and the communication styles, for example, in those countries and the opportunities that are available in those countries. So if you're somebody who is really involved in a lot of activities and this is really important to you, and we can see that you're really busy and really determined, I don't know that it's a good fit for you to live in a host community where there's zero kind of activities that you're used to doing there, or the activities are really kind of limited. So we do take into account what we know through our vast experience in managing these programs and what we can glean from you. A lot of times when we see why people want to go to certain places, I've literally seen people say, I want to go to Thailand because I want to live at the beach. Probably not going to live at the beach. So that is not a reason why we would put somebody in a particular country. But that being said, so yes, we do take into consideration what you're saying and why. We think that's important, but we also have limitations on our end. And then we have our experience where we try and make sure that we're setting you up for success in the best way possible. And I've also never heard an alum in the 10 plus years that I've worked on this program come back and say, I actually wish you'd sent me to the place that I wanted. What I have heard hundreds of times is participants saying, I really wanted this other country, but it's like they knew me and they sent me to this place. And now I can't imagine my experience any other way than in this country that I actually went to.
Yeah, for NSLI-Y, our applicants are not allowed to pick which country they will participate in. Rather, on the application, they do have the ability to list two different styles of preferences. So that's both language preference and duration preference. With NSLI-Y, you have the opportunity to select up to two, meaning your first preference could be Arabic summer and your second preference could be Persian summer. Or you can do that the same thing with duration, meaning that your first preference could be Korean summer and your second preference could be Korean academic year. One thing of note is that our program does make every effort to give applicants their first language preference. The only time we are going to give students their second language preference is if their application makes a compelling argument that they would likely be a stronger candidate for that program. But students are not going to have the ability to list their preference for countries. So some of our languages do have multiple host country locations, and NSLI-Y does reserve the right to place students accordingly. This is for a number of reasons, one of those reasons being language level. So some of our program locations are going to be better suited for complete novices of the language, while other locations are better suited for students who do already have prior knowledge in the language. So while you are not able to select what country you would be participating in, you are able to list up to two preferences for the languages and or duration. All right, what are the eligibility requirements? Sky, do you want to start?
Yeah, they are 15 to 18 and a half at the start of the program, which is June 30th of the program. So you must be 15 by June 30th of next year, and you cannot be older than 18 and a half. So I think the birthday range is December 30th on the old end for being 18 and a half, and then 15 by June 30th of next year. You need to be a US citizen, and you need to be currently enrolled in high school. So that's the eligibility is for both programs in the sense of enrolled in high school and US citizens. And NSLI-Y's and Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad differ a little bit on birth date. For us, yeah, it's June 30th is that date, but I know Libby has slightly different dates when it comes to NSLI-Y.
Yeah, Emily, maybe you can drop a link to the eligibility page of our website. So on our website, you can actually find exact birth date ranges for NSLI-Y. So as Sky mentioned, all of our participants need to be between the ages of 15 to 18 at the start of their program. And we'll actually provide you, as I just mentioned, the exact birth date ranges of how that'll work. Emily just put it in the chat. That is sort of a hard eligibility line for us. So your birthday does need to fall in between those dates. As we've already mentioned, this is a merit-based scholarship program, so you do need to have a GPA of 2.5 or higher on a 4.0 scale. If your school uses a different sort of scale for their transcripts than a 4.0 scale, or they do not provide grades, please reach out to us at our email that we will provide for you all at the end of this, and we can discuss that with you. If they're using a different scale, we ask that you see if they can convert it, but if they can't, we can assist with that. If your school does not provide grades, please feel free to reach out to us and we can discuss that with you further.
And there's no GPA requirement for Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad. And it is not having perfect grades that will get you selected for Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you say, Libby?
I was going to say it's the same for NSLI-Y. You do need to meet that requirement, but there's no sort of one size fits all for what makes up a good NSLI-Y candidate.
All right.
right.
Language. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Nope. It's all.
Language experience, you don't need any for Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad. And it's not a language program. That being said, we do teach language. You will have an introductory kind of immersive, intensive language experience, because we do want you to be able to talk to your host family and like ask for help and do all these things, talk about being tired or thirsty or needing a nap. And we don't anticipate that you speak Thai or Bahasa Indonesian or Turkish. So we do give you an intensive language at the beginning of the program, and then you should have access to regular language tutoring throughout the program. This looks different in all the countries, but it usually looks like something like once a week, maybe twice a week. But we cap the language hours because the more time you spend in a classroom is the less time you spend interacting with people in your host community. So we want to maximize that time. So we do not anticipate for 1 second that you speak the language that you're going into. However, we do understand sometimes people are like their parents are from like a Russian speaking place, right? And they might understand Russian, or maybe they already, I don't know, maybe they already like understand Cyrillic because they parents speak Russian, and so they go to Macedonia and they understand the alphabet. We do start differentiating language lessons in a lot of the countries based on that. The only thing where we do ask about language is when it comes to being placed in Morocco or Senegal, and that's because in those countries, the communities use 2 languages simultaneously. They use French and they use a local language, Darija, so Moroccan Arabic, or Wolof, or maybe even a different language, another language in Senegal, but primarily Wolof. So we don't want you having to learn 2 languages at the same time. That seems really overwhelming. So for placement in Morocco and Senegal, we would want you to have some level of French. So if you're completing an application and like to go to Yes Abroad, you're gonna get an email about when we get to the semifinalist stage, you're gonna get an email about taking a French exam. It's an assessment. It's pretty short. You would do a written exam and just an interview or a conversation, really, just to gauge your level of fluency. And based on that, we would say, yeah, this person can go to school and like live in this country because they can function. No one expects you to be fluent in that country, in that language at all. I mean, honestly, just knowing the basic grammar and having some words like that you can have a basic conversation is a huge leg up. So sometimes people don't do this because they think like, oh, I don't want to go to Senegal. But what this does is it just increases the number of countries you're eligible for. So if you really do want to do Yes Abroad, and you have kind of any level of French, I would encourage you to respond to that survey and take the assessment.
Yeah, so for NSLI-Y, our students do not need to have prior language experience in order to apply for our summer or academic year program. Our virtual program, as I mentioned early, is a beginner-only program. So in that context, for virtual NSLI-Y only, you do need to be a beginner in the language. However, for the summer and academic year abroad, we accept students at all language levels. So presently, complete novices make up about 30% of NSLI-Y's overall cohort. And then we have students at a variety of language levels throughout. So if you do have prior knowledge of one of our languages and you are accepted into the program, excuse me, prior to departing, you would take a language assessment that would be used for us to help place you in the appropriate classroom. And then while you may be in a cohort of 20 students, that cohort will then be divided into classrooms based off of language level. So if you are someone who already has prior knowledge in the language, you're not going to be in a classroom with a complete novice. Everyone will be in a classroom that will adequately challenge their language level. All right. What makes a successful applicant and participant?
I think there's a lot of overlap between NSLI-Y and Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad on this question, and then there's some kind of specific differences. So I think what makes, and Libby, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what makes a successful applicant is on both programs somebody who speaks to the goals of the program. So like if you write your NSLI-Y application all about how you really want to cook meals with your host mom and like, I don't know, watch TV with your host dad, great, but also it's a language focused program. So you should be focusing on the goals of the program. Similarly, if you apply to Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad and you're writing all about how you want to become fluent in Russian, I actually can't believe that you are going to be a good Flex Abroad participant, because being a good Flex Abroad participant isn't necessarily so much about the language, although that's a part of it. It's about how you can be a good host daughter or host son or friend or host brother. So it's about how you can learn about the host country, how you can share your American culture, whatever that looks like, wherever you're from, and you can create relationships with people. So people who are going to value that, and that's, we value whatever the programs are valuing, right? So that's part of it, is make sure you understand the differences between the programs. What makes somebody a good participant is, I often like to say, is like, think about what you need to do and work backwards. You're going to need to pick yourself up from the comfortable environment or the familiar environment that you're living in. You're going to need to move to a place where you don't know anyone, and almost certainly live with a family that you don't know. And you're going to have to create relationships with people, and you're going to have to go into a classroom setting, whether that's you by yourself in a classroom of local Macedonians or Indians or Malaysians, or it's a class of 24 other American students who are really passionate about learning the language. And you're going to have to, I like to say, be present, physically present and mentally present and emotionally present. So you're gonna have to be interested. You're gonna need to be able to work with people, and you're gonna need to be able to pay attention and understand what's being asked of you. And so what is that? What are the qualities that you think you need for that? If you are struggling and not understanding something, how do you deal with that? If you have a problem, how do you deal with that? Are you responsible? Can you take public transportation? Can you, if you see something that's going on and you don't know what to do, what's your next step? So people who can think that this program is for them, think about it. Have you had experiences in your life that prepare you for that? In fact, if you read the questions of the application, they are asking you precisely how you deal with problems, how you deal with challenges, how you create relationships with people, how you maintain relationships with people. So there's no secret to getting selected. Truly just answer the question. Don't answer the question like you're writing for a college application. So it starts with like a dramatic event, and then, we spend like a minute trying to figure out what you're talking about. Writing it fancy or writing it dramatic is not going to get you selected. Truly just answering the question and being yourself is really important. The number of people we have recently heard say that their parents wrote their application is bananas. Please don't do this. If your kid cannot write an essay to apply for this program, if they truly do not have the skills to do that, they're not ready for this program. And we're going to find that out when we're reading the application, or when your child is getting ready to get on an airplane and suddenly realizes that they can't fly without their parent, or when they get to the host community and they have a challenge and they're not prepared to deal with the realities of life in another country. So please, please, please make sure that your kid is the one who's fully invested in this, who's doing this, because it will be hard. It will be so hard. And you're not the one, and we're not the ones living that life for them. They're the ones living that life. And so they're going to be the ones to need those skills to manage themselves. And they're going to come back an amazing person. But it will be really hard, and it's going to push them out of their comfort zone big time. So yeah, what are the successful qualities? It's doing it. And it doesn't mean you can't be scared. I've done these things like this too. It's really scary. Of course it's scary. But if you think you have what it takes to manage those relationships and ask for help and live with strangers, then you probably do.
Yeah, NSLI-Y would echo everything that Sky just shared about being able to sort of be emotionally prepared to take on this challenge. One sort of facet for NSLI-Y that's also really important for a successful applicant and participant is sincere language motivation. So the application is going to ask you, for NSLI-Y applicants, why you want to study the language that you've selected. And it's important that you are able to sort of earnestly and clearly answer that question. Anyone who's learned a language knows that it can be really difficult, and there are going to be difficult, challenging moments. And having that sincere motivation to master the language, to learn the language, will help you sort of persevere through those difficult moments. So one tip I always give whenever anyone asks me what they should focus on in their application is that they sit down and they do some self-reflection on why they want to study this language, how it contributes to their future goals, and then they're able to really clearly and explicitly describe that within their application. All right, final question. What other resources are out there to learn more? Emily, maybe you can move to the next page while Sky and I talk about this. All right, so at the end of this presentation, we are going to provide you with a list of resources that include our email address, our contact information, because you can absolutely learn more by calling us, by sending us an email. If you have specific questions that you'd feel more comfortable discussing one-on-one, our offices are open 9 to 5 p.m. Eastern time, Monday through Friday. And we have staff available to take your calls as well as answer your questions. NSLI-Y, Flex Abroad, and Yes Abroad all are very active on social media. So we're also going to put up our social media handles for NSLI-Y, Flex Abroad, and Yes Abroad, both for our Instagram and our YouTube channels. These are really, really great resources. First of all of us are going to be putting up real-time notifications about things like this webinar on our social media. And then for all of us, our YouTube channels have a wealth of information. If you want to hear parent testimonials, if you want to see day in the life videos, if you want to learn how to write a competitive application, all of our YouTube channels have that kind of content there readily available. You can also leave comments there if you have a question after watching one of those videos, and our staff is monitoring that as well. So there are multiple avenues for you to be able to contact us as well as receive more information from us. This is our email address, highschoolstudyabroad@americancouncils.org. You can ask questions about any of the 3 programs at this email address, and you will get a response from a staff member who is knowledgeable about the program. So we just ask that you are understanding that we are receiving a high volume of inquiries right now, but we will get to you as soon as possible. And again, feel free to call us. Our staff are available anytime between 9 to 5 p.m. if you want to discuss something that is a bit more specific to you as a participant. NSLI-Y also has a number of drop-in office hours this application season. Going to our Instagram, you can find all of the information about that. These are, as I mentioned, drop-in hours where you can come and ask any questions that you have about your application, the selection process, or the program. Those are not recorded, so it's just a space for you to be able to inquire further about the program or ask really specific niche questions, as well as hear from other people who have questions that might be really useful to you that you haven't thought of yet. So if you want to learn more about that, head over to @NSLI-Y on Instagram, and all of that information and the link to the Zoom webinar will be there. And then
Awesome.
maybe if we can go back one and Sky can just go over the
Sure.
important deadlines.
Yep. NSLI-Y deadline quickly approaching, November 4th. Flex and Yes Abroad, December 4th. There are supplemental docs for each one. So that's like recommender and parent statement and stuff like that. And those are due November 12th and December 12th, respectively. And then, so if you're applying for all 3 programs, for example, you don't need 3 different recommendations or 3 different parent statements. You can apply for NSLI-Y on November 4th, get all your documents in order and submit them by, or have your parents or your recommenders make sure they submit them by the 12th. And then you can say like, oh yeah, I'm going to work on my Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad essays, and then hit submit by December 4th with already all of your supplemental docs submitted. So if you're applying to only Flex Abroad or Yes Abroad, your supplemental docs would be due on the 12th. If you're applying to NSLI and all the supplemental docs are due with the previous deadline on November 12th. I want to make sure we get to some of the questions. Emily Matz Henry has been doing an amazing job answering these questions in the chat. Thank you so much. There's a couple ones that I wanted to talk to you about. Security overall. So for all of the programs, the State Department makes these decisions in concert with their embassies overseas, and with our offices, right? Like we're the ones who have offices on the ground. Sometimes they say, you know, we have a strong preference for making sure we send people to this part of the world, or which country would you recommend, or what can you tell us about like all three of these countries? And then they also work with we work for the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the State Department. They check with their like regional bureau, so their Bureau for Middle East, North Africa, and say, okay, what are your priorities? What are your security? What's your sense on security in these countries? And then they also go directly to the embassies in the countries they're thinking about. All of us, we need to run host family locations and schools and stuff by the embassies before we place students in certain neighborhoods or things like that. So a lot of this stuff is done in concert. We're not putting anywhere that the State Department hasn't done research on and determined, yes, this is what we want to do. We also, like we said, we send out, you know, we have like your local coordinator or liaison or your resident director for NSLI-Y is available to you 24/7. I say with condition, I've had people text message their coordinator at 11 p.m. demanding to know the translation for baking soda. This is before smartphones, so they couldn't, I guess, just look it up on Google Translate. That's not an appropriate use of your local coordinator's time. They will not be available to translate for you at 11 p.m. on a Sunday night for baking soda. However, if you are injured or you're sick or there's something going on, they are absolutely available and they're going to help you. We also, from our US offices, send out monthly surveys to all participants. They are required to fill out, and if you don't fill them out, you get very stern emails from me, and then you get in trouble. And we review those here, and then we send all those surveys on to the State Department. All of that said, I can't protect my own 2 kids in America that I live with, right? It is impossible to 100% guarantee somebody's safety without a shadow of a doubt. Sometimes challenging things happen, right? Bad things happen. That being said, they happen everywhere. And to my knowledge, in my personal experience, we have never had anything happen to a participant overseas that isn't something that would also happen in America. And we do rely on participants to exercise caution, make good choices. If a participant gets sent home on an early return, for at least for Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, it is, I think in every single case we've ever worked with the State Department to send a participant home, it's because we do not believe that we can ensure their health and safety because they're making decisions or doing things that make us not trust them. So we do need you to be able to go to school, wake yourself up and go to school on time. And if you are experiencing something that makes you uncomfortable, to tell us about it so we can help you and we can fix it. We do expect you to look both ways when crossing the street. This is literally something the State Department asked me. Do you teach them to look both ways when crossing the street? I apologetically asked my staff member overseas, I'm so sorry to ask this. Do you do this? And they said, we literally take students out and teach them how to look both ways because traffic works different overseas than it does here. I just got back from Romania taking a group there. I can tell you the traffic that I saw, as crazy as it is what they told me, it was far better than what I face daily biking my kid to school in Washington, D.C. So, yes, like we take student health and safety. It's our number one priority, Everything else we do falls beneath that, far beneath that. That being said, we can't control all aspects of the world, right? Students are also going to be uncomfortable a lot, and they're not going to know, is this weird or is this like normal for this culture? And we teach students in pre-departure orientations to ask their local coordinator, ask their resident director. We've had to add tools to our toolboxes at our orientations that talk about safety versus discomfort. because we've seen increasingly over the past several years that people tell us, oh, I don't feel safe. And we have to say, what do you mean by you don't feel safe? Are you in a safe location? Are you injured? Are you under attack? And the answer is no, my host family's mad at me, right? Okay, yeah, that happens. Can you tell us more about that? All of the alumni that I've worked with tell us that they feel safe, at least on Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, they feel safer living overseas than they have ever going to high school in America. There's a lot of things that exist in America that don't exist overseas that as dangers. So I know it's a complex question to or a complex answer to what may seem like an easier question, but it's not an easy question. We take your kids' health and safety incredibly seriously. I get emergency calls in the middle of the night sometimes, and I'm on it, right? And that's why we do the work we do. Libby, did you see any other questions in the let's see, I see one about, can students communicate with their parents when they're on program by phoning or texting? They can. Should they is another question. The frequency of how frequently the frequency of how often they should is up for, I think, interpretation. Of course you can. Yeah. I would not recommend texting or calling your parent more than like once a week at like the minimum, maybe once every 2 weeks. Although I think that might be, harder to do. I think if you're on a 6-week program and this may be your first time overseas or away from your parents, that looks different than if you're spending 10 months in a small town in Thailand, where you might not have the same level of access that you do in a city. I don't know if you have anything to add about that, Libby.
No, I think you answered that in its entirety. Otherwise,
Question
I'm
about-
not seeing.
Oh, sorry. There's a question about borders closing. This is something that has happened. Personally evacuated, and I think Emily as well, a number of kids during COVID and Moroccan airspace closed. So that's definitely something we do. And we literally chartered a jet to bring Fulbright, Peace Corps, NSLI-Y, Yes Abroad home. We worked with Peace Corps to do that. And the jet we chartered ended up taking back private study abroad students who were not able to get out. So we've definitely managed this before. We've gotten students out of Moldova, I think, right? We've gotten participants, American Council's got people out of Georgia. Before Flex Abroad was there, we got private participants out of Georgia. So we've definitely had to manage stuff like this in the past. All right. Any other questions? I think Emily Matt's got the rest of them. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Emily. Again, like Libby said, if you have questions, email us. Children, I would love to hear from you. I love nothing more than an earnest call from an upstart in high school asking about participation on study abroad. We all love talking to you. Parents, this is your kid's job to do, right? If you have a parent question, love to talk to you. I would love to talk to a parent about a parent question. I would love to talk to a participant about an application question, about an essay, about a recommendation, about what's expected of them overseas. So again, this is like trial run for when they're going to go overseas and whether they're ready for it. But truly, if you have questions, please call us, please email us. We'd love to talk to you. Definitely join the drop-in hours for NSLI-Y. Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad are going to have some pre-recorded webinars. We had drop-in hours and like the same 4 people came to all of them. So instead, I think we're going to, we bring alumni to ours. So if you want to hear directly from alumni, we'll bring them. Parents, we're going to have one just for you as well. I'm going to bring parents of participants who've gone on the program before, and they can answer your questions and talk to you about the experience of what it was like to let their 16-year-old go to Poland or something like this. So look for that again on social media. And if you've already started an application, you'll get weekly updates that Libby puts together from all the programs. And we can make sure everybody who signs up for an application gets that announcement. So if you haven't already started an application, do it. Even if you don't start writing your essay, that's totally okay. Because you start it, you will get more frequent access to the information we share.
All right. That is our time today. Thank you everyone for joining. As I mentioned, we will be putting up a recording of this entire webinar onto our YouTube channels in the coming weeks. So keep an eye out for that as well if you want to review anything that we discussed. Otherwise, thank you to Sky and both of our Emilys for all of their help. And as Sky mentioned, feel free to contact us if you have any further questions. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Have a great night. Looking forward to working with you. And yeah, have a good week. Bye-bye.